Great. Thank you so much. I spoke a bit before. I'm going to speak. I know it's been a long day, and we've heard a lot today. And I think the one thing that we've heard the most is stories, right? So why not end the day with a story? That's all I do. I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. But I'm going to share my story with you. Now, my story is, I was considered a young caregiver. I'm not as young as Emily. And by the way, Matthew is Emily's brother, who's here as well. I wasn't as young as them, but I was basically 26 when my dad was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. This was 1999. The world was a much different place. Back in 1999, there was the Alzheimer's Society, and that's it. There was nothing else. So my dad was diagnosed at 57. They lived in Oakville at the time. What did we know about Alzheimer's? Well, we had heard of the word before. No one in our family had it. We thought what everyone else thinks. That's an older person's disease, and they'll forget where their keys are, or they'll forget some words. But, little did we know that that was not the case. So I did what every family does. Went to the Alzheimer's Society, went to my brother and sister and I, being, again, the youngest there, sitting and listening, trying to get information about the disease. But back then, things, again, were a little different, and I had a lot of questions, and I wasn't getting a lot of answers. And it was very frustrating. So the only thing that actually helped myself in the beginning, and as well as my family, was actually connecting with another family, hearing a personal story, them sharing with us, and realizing, like Emily said, that there was others out there. And that really got us through some tough times. So let me just kind of set the stage for you. My parents retired back to the cottage, and our cottage is just north of Montreal. I was living here in Toronto at the time, and my father was getting progressively worse. This is 2 or 3 years. I'm kind of jumping ahead here because I have a lot to talk about and show you. My father was getting worse. My parents were living in this small rural cottage community. I was living in Toronto. Basically what happened is my mother was calling me all the time because she did not have any support at all. There was no Alzheimer's Society there. She was calling me and saying, John, he's getting worse. He's doing this today. He's not talking to me. He's not eating. I'm having trouble changing him. And I could really hear it in her voice that she was having trouble. So in 2002, I decided to change my life, and I took it upon myself to move back to this cottage to live with them. And I gave up my job, and I gave up my apartment, and I decided to live with my parents to help my mother out. And I decided to document as well. Come on. See where the ball is? Ball's over there.
Right there.
No. Look down.
Here.
Look down.
Down.
See where the ball is?
Oh, yes. Okay, I see it now. Yeah.
Stand over here. Come stand over here.
Yeah.
Come here.
Yeah.
Hole is up that way.
Okay.
So you got to turn. Like that. Okay?
Yeah.
You can hit the ball.
All right.
Okay?
Okay.
That's it. Hey! Woo, you almost hit the pin. That's good.
I'm going home.
Why are you going home? That was a good swing.
Yeah.
Did it feel good?
Do I ever?
Excellent.
My goodness. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Do you remember playing golf here?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And I'm loving it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then Alzheimer's stopped me.
From playing?
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I had moved there. Like I mentioned, I'd pretty much put a portion of my life on hold to help take care of my dad. I was really there to give my mom a break, right? So I was there to let her go to the doctor, go shopping, go visit with friends. And in the beginning, my father needed help doing little things, helping him get his breakfast together in the morning and stuff like that. But really what I became was his companion. He really, needed companionship. He needed someone else than my mother to talk to, because a lot of people that have been through this disease, you all know that friends and family tend to stop coming around. And that happened to my parents as well. So, we would go for walks together. We would have, conversations. And really, in the beginning, I was just trying to learn, exactly what the disease was. Because, like I said, I did not learn a lot. So this was kind of like a learning process for me and my family.
So you've been going to the Alzheimer's Day.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh God, yeah. Boy,
What do you do there?
well, we had a good one, was about 2 days away, and the party was just, it was a beautiful one.
Yeah?
Oh yeah.
There was music?
Music, yeah, absolutely.
Guys playing music?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what else did you do?
At first, I used to ask my dad a lot of questions. Sometimes it was the same questions over and over again. It was almost like I didn't believe there was anything wrong with him. And I couldn't realize the struggle that was going on in his head. Maybe it's because there are no real obvious physical signs of the disease. Denial is common amongst family members.
Couple of musicians?
He got upset easily. He got very upset. You had to avoid any conflict, and that was a hard thing, because both strong-willed and stubborn. And I think when I think back, it's, that was the hardest thing for me, was to admit that he's right. He's not really right, but move on, sort of thing. I mean, that's what I think everybody that deals with Alzheimer's has to learn, that you cannot show any conflict.
So, it's interesting because we really had this relationship, and my dad was a salesman, so he loved to talk. And it was the one thing that I didn't even realize about Alzheimer's, that he was actually going to lose his ability to speak, to put a sentence together, to find words. And I didn't realize until after the fact that, I shouldn't be asking him all these questions. This is the relationship that we had. I would talk to him, how was your day? He would tell me how his day was. And I didn't know any better. It wasn't until later on when I was looking back at all this footage, and I was literally like, Chris, shut up. Stop asking him so many questions. But again, it's a learning curve, and no one was telling us how to do anything. We were just learning on our own. So at this point, it's interesting because our relationship, so there's a father with the disease. My mother's the primary caregiver. I'm like a secondary caregiver. And our family dynamics began to change. And the role of a secondary caregiver, not everyone has this, but it became very important because I became sort of like the middleman in their relationship, right? So when there was problems, my mother would come to me and say, I don't know how we're going to do this. There's a day program. How are we going to get them there? And we would talk a lot about, getting past certain things. But as well, my father would come to me and talk to me about problems that he had. Now, I was there. We were companions. We were hanging out. Obviously, I was filming. And, there was a lot of times when I would turn the camera on and I honestly didn't know what he was going to say.
Come on, you don't need another girl, do you?
Yeah, I need two more.
Two more. Marilyn's not enough?
Nah.
She does a good job, though.
She does. No, she's a good lady, but sometimes, I really get bad.
Yeah, but it's not your fault.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
You realize that? That everything that you do is wrong, it's not your fault. It's
Right,
it's the
right.
disease you have.
That's right. I love her,
Mm-hmm.
but she doesn't even, for sex, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing.
Okay.
And she just doesn't do anything of it. I think it hurts me. She's a woman, and
She doesn't want to?
She seems not to want to have sex.
Okay.
Okay, I'm saying that
Okay.
because that just sometimes I say, oh, you know, a man is a man.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do with it.
Okay. Well.
I think it became difficult for both of us because I don't know. It wasn't easy. I mean, he still was amorous at times, and you know, he always walked by and he would give me a kiss or whatever, but it wasn't the same. It never really was the same when he was sick. It was very hard, and I'm sure it was hard for him too. But I don't know, it's just like something dies, you know, you feel it's gone. You still love the person very much, and I think he did too. So it was hard.
So, you know, here's the thing, right? When I talked before in the panel, I said we need to start talking about everything. My parents, their relationship changed. It changed. It had to. So when I documented that and then started sharing it with people, a lot of people were like, oh my God, like, you know, you're talking about your parents' relationship? But all the chapters of the Alzheimer's Society thank me for leaving that in, because it's something that happens, and you have to talk about it, right? We talk about the stigma and stuff, and you know, we talk about language and stuff, and I agree with a lot of it, but if we don't start sharing absolutely every aspect of it, then how are you going to really know what the disease is? So my parents' relationship was changing, and you know, I was there to listen to my dad, and I was there to listen to my mom and try to work out things between them. So my dad had this, as I said, he was a salesman. He loved to talk. He had this great energy about him. He loved parties. He loved going to parties. In fact, one of the things somebody did tell us is that, you know, with this disease, he's going to not going to want to be around people and crowds and stuff. And I've heard that happen before, but that was not him at all. He loved parties. He loved talking to people. My mom used to tell me this amazing story when before they moved to the cottage, when they lived in Oakville, she was working for the day and he'd be home alone, and we had this dog, so the two of them would go for walks. And my mother would come home and there'd be all these coffee cups around the kitchen table. And my mother would be like, how many coffees did you have, John? He said, oh, it wasn't me. It was those other people. And my mother's like, who? And she's like, I don't know their names. They were walking by the house. And I went out, and I invited them in for a coffee. So he was, if one of the first things he would always say to people, hi, I'm John, I have Alzheimer's. He would tell them, no problem. And we all, you know, we talk about those moments where, as tough as this disease is, those happier moments. And I can remember, this is another story that happened, and we were at, it was a woman's birthday, one of their friends' birthday parties, and maybe she was, you know, turning 55 or something, and it's part of lots of people there, all their friends, my mom and dad there, and it's that part of the party where she sits down and starts opening up everyone's gifts, and it's all quiet, and my dad yells out, boring! And my mother was so embarrassed, and I just started laughing, like, it was boring, like, you know? So there's those moments that my dad would shine through, and, you know, maybe it was his way of fighting against the disease, I don't know. But, you know, he was this very happy guy, even when he still was getting the disease.
I wonder who, you know, who's that?
Who do you think that is?
That was old.
It's not you,
No?
but it's one of your kids. Who
Do
is
you know?
it?
Do you know?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Take a guess. You got a 1 in 3 chance.
It's not Polly. No.
She's your grandchild.
Yeah.
Who are your 3 kids?
Me?
No.
No?
Who am I? What's my name?
John.
No.
Wynn.
That's your name.
John Wynn.
What's my name? Chris.
Chris!
That's right. And who is your daughter? The one that's having the baby. What's her name? You just spoke to her on the phone.
Yes. Tracy!
Now, who's the picture of? Your other son. Your firstborn.
Chris
No,
No.
that right there.
Right here?
Yeah.
Right
That
there?
is your oldest son,
Isn't it?
the father of Polly.
Really?
Yeah, and his name is
Well, I don't know.
Mike.
Mike! Oh!
That's Mike.
Mike!
Yeah. Does it look like him?
Yeah! Lucky guy.
So, it's also another great example of my stupid questions, right? So it got to the part where, when I look at that clip now, and it's not actually that he doesn't remember or doesn't know the name. It's I'm just confusing the hell out of him, right? His father, Polly, who's the one that's, So again, it's this huge learning curve that we had to go through. And another part of the learning curve is, when he did get upset, was about distraction, right? So when he was mad or couldn't find the word, it was better, instead of trying to help him and say, oh, who are you thinking about and what'd you do today, we just would try to distract him away from the way he was thinking. And music played a huge part in that, putting on music, changing the subject, just telling him about what I was doing instead of asking questions, just talking to him. But that, again, was a huge learning curve. So as happy my dad was at times, obviously there was some tougher times as well. He went through a depression, which I know a lot of people go through, and we heard other people talk about that earlier today. And, he would go, him and my mom wouldn't talk for a while. By this time, this is about a year. I had actually lived with them for a year now up at the cottage. I was in my early 30s at this point. I hadn't been working. Again, like I said, I'd put my kind of life on hold for about a year. So, I was gradually thinking about, getting back to some sort of life and stuff like that. But I also knew that I had to be close because I knew my mother still needed a lot of help. And she needed a lot of help because, again, he would go through these bouts of depression or just being mad or being upset. And, we really didn't know what to do. But this is an example, and after it's over, I'll tell you. Well, you kind of see what I did, but you'll be able to, I'll tell you as well.
Me and my wife settled down.
Even though our family has had many pets, Hadley and my father were best buddies.
Gonna take a little stroll downtown. Well,
Hadley didn't make him eat all his porridge or ask him any questions, and sometimes Hadley was the only one he could confide in.
Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. See you in my dream.
Could go days, sometimes weeks, that he wouldn't talk to me. Just, pretend I wasn't there. But I got used to it in a way, but it was hard to deal with. But I think now it might have been part of a depression that he was going through, and I didn't realize it. Because I know that that's part of the Alzheimer's stages, or depression.
What's going on, John? I said, what's going on? Why'd you come down here?
I really want to kill myself.
You want to what?
Kill myself.
Are you joking?
Absolutely.
So let me just talk about that for a second. So when I was talking before about distraction, so here's this situation where I think it was an early morning where he just kind of woke up and you could see it in his face, and he walked by me and he went, this was the basement, so he just went downstairs. And I followed him down, and I could see he was upset and depressed, and I had the camera and I was filming him. And then I was thinking to myself, okay, so what do I do here? Talking to him is not going to help. So I put the camera down, and I went and got the dog, right? And I pulled the dog over, and I just put the dog in front of him, and I stepped back, and I turned the camera back on, and I just kind of let things happen. And it took, 10, 15 minutes maybe. I can't remember exactly how long it took, but he noticed the dog, and he'd start to pet at the dog he saw. licked his hands, and I just let them bond for a bit, you know. And eventually he started to have a little smile on his face. And then I just said, hey, let's go have some breakfast, you know. And that was it. You know, that was this learning curve that we were trying to, you know, get past little things. But it wasn't like everything worked all the time. You try something, it might work, it might not work the next day. You know, you don't know. So it was something that we shared between ourselves, my mom and my brother and sister and I, and we did the best we could, is what it comes down to. Now, I had mentioned before that I had been there for a year and it was time to get on with my life, and I realized I couldn't move back to Toronto. See, my brother and sister both had started families and I was single and didn't have kids, so I felt that I could be the one to help my mother the most. But I still had to get back to some sort of life. So I moved downtown Montreal, worked part-time so I could still have enough flexibility to go up whenever I wanted. But this still put a lot of pressure back on my mother because she, again, was the full-time caregiver, not getting any support. Now, you see, you know, I have a lot of footage and there was times that I could film. There was obviously times that I could not film and just had to be a son. And one morning, obviously I don't have any footage of this, but I'll just tell you the story. My mother woke up. I happened to be there. It was a weekend. And she came running into the room I was in, and she just said, we have to go to the hospital. I'm having a heart attack. So with my dad there, so confused, the three of us rushed my mother to the hospital because she could feel it, all the tightness up here. It ended up, she was just having a massive stress attack, which is obviously very common with what she was going through. And she had to spend 2 weeks in the hospital, and I had to take time off work and spend time with my dad. For 2 weeks, I stayed with him. We drove to the hospital every day to visit her. He was very confused. He thought she was going to die. You know, just going through that day in and day out and the repetitiveness of it, you know, was very difficult for me. But this was a huge wake-up call for us. This was, you know, my brother and sister and my mom, as stubborn as she was, for us to say, you know, Mom, like, this is getting serious. You can't handle this anymore. So eventually, you know, we had to talk about long-term care. And really, when it came down to it, because a lot of people say, oh, you know, how did you decide on long-term care? How did that decision come up? And it was basically about my mother. Like, you know, Mom, have you had enough? Because, you know, I went there to help my dad, and I helped him as much as I could, but we all know that this disease, it doesn't get better. And so it's like, I got to focus on my mom, make sure she doesn't get sick. So eventually my father, he was 63 when he went into a long-term care. The long-term care was near the cottage. There was only one long-term care facility, so that's where he went. Luckily, my mother was from the small town. She knew a lot of the women that worked there. But it was still difficult to get him in. We didn't tell him he was going to go into long-term care. It was baby steps. Dad, you're going to go to a day program today. Dad, you're going to stay for lunch. Dad, you're going to have a nap here. And it kind of got that way. You know, we really wanted him, as hard as it is, to kind of, you know, get used to the long-term care. The amazing thing was the clip before, the dog, that was an old dog. And, you know, like I said in the clip there, you know, the dog never judged him. In fact, my dad used to joke, he goes, I think Hadley's got Alzheimer's. But the dog was his friend, and the dog was old, and we were nervous that the dog was going to pass away. And then it really hurt my dad. Amazingly, the dog passed away a week after my dad went into the home. And he would ask about Hadley, and basically we would just say, you know, Hadley's sleeping, Hadley's sleeping. And he would ask about going home, and we would say, oh, we'd always distract him, oh, but there's a lot going on here. And so as hard as it was, we wanted to try to make him feel as comfortable as he could at the home, because we wanted to make sure that he eventually would think that long-term care is his new home. And it took a while, but the tough part about it as well is that, and I know I've heard a lot of stories about this, is that he did get worse once he went into the home.
We were told that people with early onset Alzheimer's decline at a faster rate. After 6 months of my father being in the home, I started to believe it.
A little bit more. You know, sometimes you blame yourself. Should I have put him in so early? Would he have gone that fast if I had kept him at home? It's hard to know.
But imagine if he did get that worse when he was at home.
Oh, I couldn't have coped with it, for sure. No, exactly. No, I couldn't have.
Even though my dad was getting worse, we tried to stimulate him with activities he loved the most. Music must have triggered something in my dad's memory that brought him back to when he was a teenager and first dating my mom. There's some things you can never forget.
I mean, he still smiled. You know, he knew somebody was there. I mean, for a long time he said my name, and then all of a sudden he didn't. You know, he was just happy to see a person.
Hi. Good. How are you? John Wynn.
Michael Wynn,
Oh, yeah.
your son.
You walk all over.
Numero uno.
Different.
Chris is the second son.
Right.
Most important.
Right, second was most important. First wasn't. Hey? Hey, today's Christmas. Yeah.
Oh, shit.
So, you know, just to say again that was literally after a year of being in the home. And he when we took him into the home, he could walk through the door, but within, 6-7 months, he was in a wheelchair. So it was very hard on my mother because as she says, did I put him in too early? Would he have gotten worse at home? And at that point, we're convincing her, yes, he would have gotten that worse at home. So it was the best decision. But, and what I said earlier, going to visit him, and what my mother said, there was a time when he would stop saying our names. And it's like, well, he got to a point also when he was happy in his brain and he was singing along to songs and stuff. And really that's all that mattered at that point, is that he was happy. It was interesting enough because this long-term care facility, they had never dealt with anybody. They had a woman who was in her 80s who had Alzheimer's, but someone who's 63, they didn't know what to do. I was training them. I was literally training them, like saying to them, you know what? When you go into his room and you give him food or you're going to change him, have a smile on your face. Like, really have to smile because, he's going to feed off your energy. And if you're having a crappy day, then it's going to make that 10 times worse. So, I'm happy today that I think that facility has learned a lot over the years. But it was a learning curve. And, when I get back to, remember earlier I was talking about mainstream media. Here's another question I always got from the media. So your dad went into a home. Oh, what a relief. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you should worry 10 times more because, who's doing this? Who's he with right now? Who's feeding him? Who's hanging out with him? So it was definitely tough, him going into a home. But, we thought that he had gotten to a point when he got that worse in the wheelchair and smiling and kind of singing to music and stuff. We thought that he was happy in his own mind, and we were, happy about who he was. And here's another thing that families have a tough time doing when people get these diseases. They think about the past, who the person used to be. They think about what's going to happen in the future. And really, it's about today. It's really about what's happening right now. And hard as it is, accepting who they are at this moment. And, living for the moment, realizing that when you're hanging out with your mom, Emily and Matt and the other people that, your mom's great. I love her. And, she's a lot of fun. But, be in that moment and laugh when she laughs, because that's what you have to do. I remember those days and laughing along with my dad because, unfortunately, it is going to get worse. So this was about 2005. Getting into 2006. He was going to turn 65 that summer. I have a clip, but that I'm not going to show you. I'm just going to describe it to you. We actually brought him home for his 65th birthday. Brought him back to the cottage, had this big party for him, had a bunch of musicians play. It was amazing to see people's faces when they saw him, because nobody went to visit him. friends came to the party to support my mother, but when we wheeled him in with a wheelchair, those people were just like, they couldn't believe the state he was in because they didn't know, because they were too afraid to come and hang out, which is, understandable. However, so it was a nice party for his 65th birthday, but unfortunately that would be his last time coming back to the cottage because he ended up passing away about a month later. He ended up getting pneumonia, and he was in the hospital for 2 weeks. And and that was basically it. So, excuse me, where my story kind of goes from there is sort of interesting, because you have to imagine that I've been a caregiver for my father. It's been a good 7 or 8 years. He's had this disease. He's passed away. We go through the grieving stage of a year or so. And then I start to think about this video footage that I have. And I start to think about what I said before is hearing a personal story and how much it helped me. And so I started to think, well, that's what I need to do. I need to take that footage. It was a whole year. I didn't start doing it right away. And I started to think, you know what, I'm gonna do something with this footage, and that's exactly what I did. So about 2 years later, I came up with an idea for this film.
Who am I? What's my name?
John
No?
Wynn.
That's your name.
John Wynn.
What's my name?
In 1999, at the young age of 57, my father was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. At this point, I decided to begin documenting what was happening to him and our family. But there were times when it wasn't easy.
What's going on, John? I said, what's going on?
I don't feel.
Why'd you come down here?
I really want to kill myself.
You want to what?
Kill myself.
Are you joking?
I'm sorry.
Spending all this time with my father also made me start to think about my own future. I know we have many things in common, but what I hope is we don't share this disease.
Take off this. Oh, take that off. No. No, the white shirt. This thing. Take this off. Oh. There you go. Okay, you go to sleep, okay?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, good night.
So, I decided, obviously, to put this film together, which wasn't easy in itself, but I've only shown you a few clips today. In fact, it's all online. If you go to forgetfulnotforgotten.com, you can see the whole thing. But in the film, I actually, explore my own possibilities of possibly inheriting this disease. So it was kind of therapeutic for me to do this. And, this played on TV Ontario and out in BC as well, and played in some film festivals in the US. But again, for me, I had been a caregiver. My dad had passed away. I had made this film, and then, that was pretty much it, right? I thought, okay, that's it with my journey with Alzheimer's. I've done my share. Little did I know that was not it. Good reason, though. I got a phone call in the spring of 2010 from the Alzheimer's Society of Belleville saying, can you come and show Forgetful Not Forgotten, and can you talk about it? And I said, sure, I can come show the film. I'm like, but you want me to talk about it? Like, okay. So I did that, and then another chapter called, and another chapter called, and another chapter called. So since about 2010, I've been to almost pretty much every chapter of the Alzheimer's Society here in Ontario and BC, showing parts of this film, talking about my experience. And it's interesting to share knowledge and share a story and really try to, help people, or not help people, but, kind of see the disease for what it is. And, for me, I've been in front of a lot of crowds, and usually when I get up in front of a crowd, it's usually all it's actually nice to be here because it's usually all 50 plus that I'm talking to. So when I was saying before about, creating projects to inform people, it's a lot of different people from the different chapters of the Alzheimer's Society always talk about younger, right? How do we engage younger people? And it's still even hard for younger people to watch Forgetful Not Forgotten, and I understand why. And I started to think, through all these presentations and looking out at the crowd, I'm like, how come there's no youth here? And how can, engage the youth? So about 3 years ago, as I was doing these presentations, I started to think of another film. And the film is just exactly about that. It's about young caregivers. You just heard this amazing speech from Emily, and she is in the film. And her brother Matt and their family is in it. And I thought to myself, if I can tell a story that focuses on younger people, then whether the disease is in your family or not, you're going to be more inclined to watch a story like this. So we've been filming for 2 years. Right, Matt, Emily? You guys, these two are sick of me because I've been coming to their house every day for like 2 years. And we're just finished editing it now. It's going to be on TVO in January. It's called Much Too Young. And not a lot of people have seen this. This is only a few here have actually seen this. And this is a clip. It's a trailer for Much Too Young. Emily is in this film. You might not see her in this in this trailer, but she is in this film.
It's just really hard, I think, to feel good about where you are in life when this is always like looming over you and you always, no matter what's going on, have to come home. It's really hard to process. Like at times I feel like it's impossible and I can't believe it's my life.
It's not something that you can understand until, it's really hard to understand until you're kind of forced into it. I tell myself it doesn't, but I know I'd be a lot more productive if this wasn't going on.
Right now is the time that all my friends are sort of becoming friends with their parents and they're forming like these really strong bonds, and I don't get the same opportunity to do that because my role is sort of reversed. I'm playing the role of someone who's 50 and taking care of their parents rather than becoming best friends and like moving into this next stage of our lives. So it's a little bit different, but it's still important, and she's still my mom, so.
This is Memory Ball. We heard Carolyn earlier today. This is Memory Ball.
It's hard to be a caregiver at this age because it's so unusual. It's just a time in your life when you're encouraged to be selfish and just all those things about your 20s, like do stuff, make mistakes, like why not try this, why not move here, like travel here, and you just don't have that option.
It's just like feel it from both directions. I always feel like I'm not doing enough at the lab, and I always feel like I'm not doing enough at home. And I have like aspirations, and like before all this happened, like I sort of had an idea of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go next, and basically taking care of a parent and those aspirations, they're not gonna, they both can't happen, so.
I think that looking forward, I know that my life events will be very different than other people's. Potentially my mom won't be at my wedding. Like when I have a baby, my mom won't be there to give me advice, so. It feels really unfair. I know that I'm gonna have to move into this next stage of my life and watch all my friends have their moms there. And I'm gonna be so jealous. But I still have my mom, and that's the most important part. So I've really learned to appreciate the moms that I have now and not worry so much about the future and just enjoy everything that I have today.
And now that it's happening, can't believe that it's happening. But I find hope when you smile at me, just the way that you used to. And the smile I see, I wish I could get used to. I'll see it less every day, and you change. I'll hide the pain, no matter how much it hurts. It's always worth it when you smile at me. You smile at me.
So that is the new film, Much Too Young. That was Kathleen. That's Emily and Matthew's older sister that we saw there. And so here's the thing, right? These films are not easy to make. They're not easy to watch. But you know what they are? I'm going to swear. They're fucking real is what they are. It's not Still Alice. It's not The Notebook. It's really what happens. And, you know, if we want to beat the stigma behind this disease, we got to frickin' show and talk about every goddamn aspect of it. And we have to show the reality of it. And in the film, there's funny moments. And in Forgetful Not Forgotten, there's funny moments. But it is what it is. And it's still really hard. It's been a struggle to make these films, but when I think how hard it's been to make Much Too Young, I just think about how hard it is for Emily and Matthew and Kathleen and the other families. But it's hard for people to watch it too. It's hard for broadcasters to pick it up. It's hard to, you know, get it into film festivals and stuff because it's still that stigma behind it. But, you know, it is real and it is what it is. So to kind of finish off here, you know, and I don't know if there's any questions, we can have discussions. I'd be happy to do talk about anything. I'm just going to finish off by, you know, my father actually passed away 10 years ago, last Tuesday. It's been 10 years. So why would I do this? Why am I here? Why didn't I stop, you know, after Forgetful Not Forgotten? I do this for a few reasons. As you can obviously tell, it's needed. It's really needed. Personal stories. We need so many people to come forward and tell personal stories. It's crazy. We need everybody. I mean, you saw a bit of Forgetful Not Forgotten. You saw 3 other families in Much Too Young. Just imagine if everybody just started, you know, sharing, blogging, whatever, taking photos. Just, it's really helped me a lot to share my story, and I really encourage other people to do it. If you're, you know, a youth here today and you don't have it in your family, I encourage you to not just leave this weekend and think, wow, I learned something about Alzheimer's. Do something about it. You know, there's great groups here in Toronto. Memory Ball. There's another group called Purple Elephant. There's the Alzheimer's Society. There's MAREP in, you know, Waterloo. There's so many great organizations that need help. So get involved. Do stuff. You know, start telling tons and tons of stories because, you know, there's a common saying that with Alzheimer's, when you've heard one story, you've only heard one story. And so that's what I said before, that, you know, even if you watch Forgetful Not Forgotten, you still don't know all about Alzheimer's. Even if when you watch Much Too Young, you still don't know all about Alzheimer's dementia. And we need people to be more engaged and, you know, need people to really start talking about it on different levels. So I do it because it's needed. The second reason that I do this, because I still want to honor my dad, right? I want to, you know, he raised me. He did a great job of raising a family, and he gave me everything I ever wanted, so it's the least I can do to honor him. Here's the third reason why I do this, and this is interesting because a lot of people say, you made Forgetful Not Forgotten, you've made Much Too Young. Would you ever make a third film about Alzheimer's? And yes, there is one other reason that I would make another film about Alzheimer's. Can anybody guess what it is? Yeah, if I get it. Because my father had early onset, I have a chance of inheriting this disease. He was 57, I'm 44 now. You know, roughly, who knows, I could actually start to develop this disease in less than 10 years. And I need to know that I have 2 young sons, I have a wife, and I need to know that there's a better support out there for them when this happens. It could happen to my wife. It's in her family as well. Even if it doesn't, I know I'm going to know somebody else. My brother, my sister, another cousin. I had just had another uncle diagnosed. We all know that it's coming, right? So I just want to keep spreading. I'm not an expert. I'm not, a lot of people say, oh, you must know a lot about Alzheimer's. I have no clue about Alzheimer's. I know what my dad went through. I don't know what happens in the brain. I don't know anything about the drugs people take. I just know that my story has helped, and I want to share more stories, and that's why I'm made Much Too Young. And I really feel like to help organizations and other people go through this, try to get more funding, try to get more support, it's all I can do. So that's what I really tried to do. I'm actually going to play one last little clip from Forgetful Not Forgotten.
Well, it's just,
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Even though spending so much time with my dad made me think about my future, I still cherish all these moments. Alzheimer's can be a very devastating disease, but I always try to look at the positive side. And I believe at this stage of his life, he was happy.
Watch your knees.
We were also at a point in our relationship that I never thought we'd get to. We were more than just father and son. We were friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I look back on my relationship with my dad throughout his whole life, not just even when he got the disease. We were still father, son, we were friends. I take a lot of the positive from what happened, and I think, we really got close when he got that disease. Obviously I never wanted him to have it, but it really pulled me closer. So there was a lot of positives there that I take from it. And really passing on my story, passing on other stories, it's been rewarding for sure, and I'll continue to do it as long as it's needed. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions, comments, anything at all you want to talk about? Blue Jays, I don't care. People often ask me about my mom and how she's doing now, and she's great. She obviously went through a lot, but she's happy to to share this story and stuff like that. So she's doing well. She's actually been dating someone for a couple of years now, so yeah, she's doing really well. In the film Forgetful Not Forgotten, I questioned about having kids. Like I mentioned, I do have 2 kids now because I can't let it control my life, whether I'm going to get this disease or not, right? I got to keep living and keep moving on and stuff like that. So, sorry, I was going to pull up something. It was funny, someone presented earlier and they didn't have their contacts. I'm like, I don't have my contacts either. But if you go to Forgetful Not Forgotten, you can watch the full film. If you go to Facebook, you can find a Facebook page about Much Too Young. And hopefully my contacts will come up here. No, it's not very straight, sorry. You can just email me at CAWynn, Hotmail, or follow me at Chris Wynn, CLF. That's just Kern Lake Films at Twitter. But if you go to forgetfulnotforgotten.com, you can see it's in 3 parts, the full film. It's about an hour. But you can watch the whole film there. And Much Too Young will be on TVO in January. Yes, Rebecca. Good question. Yeah. 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 It's funny because it's a good question because in the beginning, he actually must have thought I was taking pictures of him because I'd hold up the video camera and he'd stand and start smiling, and I'd be like, no, Dad, I'm just shooting some video. After a while, he didn't notice. He was very, it's hard to describe with objects and stuff. He couldn't really, I could put his coffee in front of him and say, there's your coffee, Dad, and he'd see it. And yeah, that's my coffee. But he didn't know how to pick it up. So he didn't realize that I was filming him a lot of the time. And it was only in the beginning when he really asked. And there's actually a scene in the film where I show him older movies because my parents were great at documenting. They had old 8mm film And there's a whole scene where we reminisce and I show him a bunch of old films, and he really likes to watch that and stuff like that. But for me documenting him, no, he didn't. At the beginning, he kind of noticed the camera, and I would say, oh, I'm just filming the lake or something like that. And then after a while, he kind of forgot. But that makes me think of something else. For this, which really interesting about what we're doing with what we've done with Much Too Young is, and Matthew and Emily can talk about this as well, is that the two guys that I had working with me, the cinematographer and the sound man, they didn't know anything. They knew about Alzheimer's, what the average person knows. And it was amazing to see how they changed over the process. You know, it was amazing to see, not with Emily and Matthew's mom, but with the other family, Patricia, who's at a later stage. She's at a stage now, still lives at home, but she's at the stage where she's walking around and mumbling, and she'll come right up to you in the face. And I knew, like, when I first saw her, you know, I'm smiling, hi, Patricia, great to see you. But Russell and Chris, those are the crew members, they were very, like, standoffish, like they didn't know. A year and a half later, here we are filming, and we stop filming, and Patricia's wandering away, and there's Russell going, come on, Patricia, like holding her hand, come back, sit down. And I'm thinking, this is amazing. Like, it's too bad not everybody could experience this, right? Spending time with people. And you realize that there's nothing to be afraid of. Like, it's just, it is what it is, and you get used to it. So it was amazing to see their progression with the disease as well. Yes. So yeah, this was an idea, and I'd mentioned it earlier. I had this probably 3 years ago. I actually had AGO on board, Art Gallery of Ontario. They're on board. And yeah, so it was an idea to run workshops for students through high schools where they'd come in on weekends, and we would teach them how to use cameras and how to edit. And then we would hook up with long-term care, and they'd have to make a short film about someone with dementia. It never got taken off, and to be honest with you, I don't think she's here anymore, but the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto was not willing to help me, because I needed that connection, right? I needed a connection with long-term care. I mean, it could still happen. You know, it's about finding funding and stuff like that. But yeah, that was the idea, keeping kids interested creatively and having like a workshop where the beginning of the workshop, if you know, we've gone and the kids have filmed, the start of the next workshop, like let's chat, like let's talk about, you know, any questions, what do you want to talk about? And every workshop, as they're working on their short film, how are they not going to learn about this disease, even though, you know, they're not living with it? They're just being interested creatively. So it's still a project that if you want to pursue it, I'm willing to go, anybody. But it's like anything, right? Funding. It's always about funding. So yeah, that's still in the works, I guess. Any other comments or questions, or trying to think of what else. Another question people used to ask me all the time is about drugs, right? What drugs was your father on? What did he, you know, they always want to know what he was on. He was on Aricept the whole time. The next question I always get is, did those drugs help? And my answer is, how the hell am I supposed to know? Like, I don't even know how this disease is going to progress. How am I supposed to know if drugs are slowing it down or whatever? So, you know, my mother really believes that they helped, and, you know, and then I was like, if she's happy, then I'm happy, but I don't know if it helped or not. Yeah, there were certain little things like that, you know, that all the different aspects of the disease that we went through. But still, you know, meeting these new families and making this film, I learned so much, again, from these two and the other families, stuff that I never went through. So that's why I always encourage people to watch more than one film or two films to try to get as much as you can. Is there anything else? Any other comments, questions? Again, so you can watch it all of Forgetful Not Forgotten online, and go to Facebook to follow Much Too Young, or follow me on Twitter and look for Much Too Young in January on TVO. Thank you.